Always great to be with the team from the Archdiocese of Boston. Thanks everyone for having me back. Mary, Patsy, and all my friends on YouTube. Great to be with you today. I was thinking a lot about that idea of being welcomed and what that really feels like. I travel a lot with Life Teen and have been really blessed to get to go experience and meet a lot of people and a lot of different parishes. But on occasion, I get to go find my own parish to go to and where I'm traveling, and I get to find my own time for Mass. A couple weeks ago, my husband and I went to Fort Lauderdale just for like a couple days away, couple weeks. Wouldn't that be a dream? Couple days away. We have 4 kids at home and it's cold and snowy in St. Louis. And so I have a lot of Southwest points. So, you know me, I'm always looking for where there's a direct flight that takes points. And so we went to Florida, and we were flying home super early on Sunday morning. And so we were like, okay, let's go find a vigil Mass. And, you know, you're like looking around, where's the vigil Mass where to go to? And we walked in. It's clearly a very snowbird church. Like there's definitely only people there who are there on their vacations months. And we walked in and someone came right up to us and welcomed us, probably because we were the youngest people there, but they were very excited that we were there. Then they asked us to bring up the gifts. And I thought, well, that is hospitality at its finest, man. They're just, come on in. We're glad you're here. Here's a roll. This is church in its finest. So, but felt super welcomed, like felt very welcomed that we mattered. We were reflecting when we went to dinner that night on all the other parishes we had ever been to as a family or a couple where we felt incredibly welcomed. And years ago, I was pregnant with our third, and we had a couple kids pretty close together. So I've got, like a 2-year-old and a 1-year-old, and I'm pregnant. And we were driving to Alabama. We went through Birmingham, and we needed to find a Mass. And we went to an African-American church that had no air conditioning in the dead of August. And everyone is in their finest Sunday, everyone's all gussied up. Looks good. We walk in. We clearly are tourists in that way, they're like, wow, you're definitely new. But man, they came up to us. They shook our hands. They welcomed us. We had little pins that said you are welcome here. Like they cared very much. At the end of Mass, they stood us up and prayed a blessing over our family. So either they're just incredibly hospitable, or they're a parish that sees a lot of tourists and combined with that too. So, but I remember those moments of being incredibly welcomed at these parishes that had no stake in the game for me. They weren't out there to say like, oh, we're going to make this person become the best Eucharistic minister volunteer we've ever seen, or they're going to be the next DRE or our newest catechist. The stake in the game for them was that we felt welcome, that we felt like we belonged, and it mattered to them that we walked through their front doors. And that stuck with me all of these years, especially the years as a youth minister, and then beyond that while I've been at Life Teen. But I think the way that we welcome people into our parishes for sure, and especially into our time of youth ministry and our large group gatherings that I'll be speaking about tonight, really has such a ripple effect in how we just make people feel like it matters that they're there. And that we want people to walk away with that feeling, and that maybe 5-10 years down the line, they're able to tell that story to someone else because that teenager walked through the doors and was like, oh, someone cared that I showed up. Tonight, I get to talk about large group gatherings, and part of that stems from the fact that at Life Teen, that's one of our biggest pieces of high school catechesis is in a large group setting, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But really, some of the ideas around how we make this an impactful experience for people who get to walk through our doors. One of the things that the catechesis team was sharing with me recently was that in Christian churches, they say that the average time that someone shows up to church or to Mass, and obviously this could speculate different in dioceses, is every 6 weeks. The average Christian decides that maybe once a month they'll go over to their church. And I think that that could be very true for some of our people, especially in 2025, where they've sort of run out of the habit of going regularly like they might have before the pandemic. But more than anything, I think it allows us to start to recognize what is youth ministry doing to meet and be aware of that drop-in mentality that might exist inside of our church, inside of our parish. And in a teenager's world, we talk about the world of teens are busy, their schedules are full, our schedules are full, family schedules are full. But they have so many options that are in front of them. And it's kind of that joke about I have fear of fear of being invited. Like sometimes I'm like, I just want to pretend I'm an introvert. Don't invite me. But then it's like, they might have fear of a better option. They might have that idea of like, well, I want to do this youth group thing, but what if this other thing comes up? And so they might be a little more non-committal. But that drop in mentality that they might have could be one of the best opportunities to welcome them in. The number of teenagers who are on their way home from a late night practice or a game or an extracurricular, but knew that we were having our youth group on Thursday nights and that they could drive past the church and they could swing in at 6:58 and there we would be excited to see them, I think makes a world of difference, that they know that they can make that decision on the fly if they're still in a little bit of that inconsistency on whether or not they make that the every week priority. And I think that matters in how we approach every time a teenager walks through the door, is that hope that they feel not only welcome, but that they want to not just drop in this time, but they want to make this a consistent commitment inside of that. And so when we talk about large group gatherings, sometimes there's this pull and push around, is it large or is it small? And what are we supposed to do? And I think it's all of the above in so many ways, because I think there's an opportunity where we get to open our doors and cast wide, where people feel like I can drop in, I can bring a friend, I can kind of come and go as I please. And not that that's the ideal, but if that's where they are, it's kind of good for us to know that we're there and the door is open in that. I think what's important about the large group setup is that it can be a little less intimidating if they don't know the plan. So like, I don't know what this week is, or the topic is, or the theme is, or who's going to be there. But maybe that's okay, because I know there's going to be people and there's going to be food and there's going to be music and there's going to be a game. And maybe that is one of the initial pieces that can be an attraction into getting them to walk through the door. We all walk through the door of something new at some point in our life. And sometimes we do it with sweaty palms, and sometimes we do it with really bold hearts. And other times we're scared to death and it becomes the best thing in our life. But I think we need sometimes a little bit of the, okay, I'm going in and this is kind of the pull that I have coming with me. Plus, it was kind of cool because it gives you a chance to have teens get an invitation space for their friends to feel like, yeah, just come on, let's just see what it's like. And it's a little bit more of a relaxed environment, especially as you're getting going. But I think it's important to ask the question about our community. So when we look at the teens inside of our parish, we should evaluate the idea of how connected are they right now? Is the community really tight-knit? Are the teens really connected with each other? If we sat in a group right now, would they be willing and excited to go deep? Like, do we have teens that are like, man, give me more apologetics tomorrow? And do we have teens who are like, wait, I'm still kind of wrestling with this whole God thing, and like that could also be a spectrum. We could have both and inside of our parishes and who are connected with us. But it's good to ask ourselves, as we're building and rebuilding ministries over the seasons that come and go, what does the group look like that they need in this moment? And so a lot of times it's focusing on the developmental needs that are designed to have that broad appeal. So we want to be able to find the teenager who is like, I want to go deep into apologetics. And we want the teen who's like, I'm wrestling with this whole thing. What are we doing? And that's where the large group can meet that. It's designed to have that broad reach of where teens are, that they can come and have a sense that they're welcome and that they belong. One of the things that we talk about a lot at Life Teen is we talk about our large group catechetical sessions. That's what we call life nights. And these large group catechetical sessions, our emphasis is always that it's not in a classroom. But really importantly, I think the structure of how we lay out any large group really matters. Our specific structure follows the model of the Mass. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Gather, proclaim, break, and send. But what's ironic is if I just land in some parish in Nebraska, or I just go anywhere up in Minnesota, or I'm down in Texas and I'm going to Mass, and we're talking about their youth group, because you know me, as soon as I left that parish on a couple Saturdays ago, I went up, found Father Ernest. We were like, what are you doing for youth ministry? Because I don't know how to not be on. And we're having a conversation, but everywhere I go, I love to grab the bulletin. I love to see what youth ministry is doing, whatever. And a lot of times, regardless of if it's a Life Teen thing or not, they're doing gather, proclaim, break, send. I think it's innately just in us. If we have a large group set up, we're gathering with students, we're proclaiming the gospel, we're breaking it open, and we're sending everyone forth. And so to walk through a large group night should have some structure. I am a firm believer that gather, proclaim, break, send works very well. But I think regardless of how parishes set it up, it needs to have meat of the faith. It needs to have fun. It needs to have prayer. And that structure really will matter so that kids feel like there's purpose. I've talked to youth ministers who say, oh, we have these youth groups and it's so great and people come, but then the kids feel like there's like nothing we're doing and we don't, like, we're kind of just hanging out. And then like, after a couple of months, they like kind of stop showing up because we don't have anything to offer them. Because I think deep down, they wanted to also feel like it's worth their time. And so when we provide something for them, I think you can have the fun and you can have the excitement, but it can also still be aligned with the structure that will best serve the transitional moments to make it feel the most impactful. If you haven't heard me break open, gather, proclaim, break, send, I'll do it very briefly. And then obviously we can chat about that another time. But the hope is that a gather really is the minute that teenagers walk through those doors until the minute we start proclaiming the gospel. So what that looks like is everything from the hospitality at the front doors, how we are welcoming them and saying their name, how we're making sure that we're gathering, maybe we're playing a game, we're having a snack, or we're just chit-chatting, something that feels like there's a community being built. And I always love to say we should be more dynamic in that gather time than the cell phone in their pocket. So the hope is that these mentors are engaging with these students and having conversations with them about what's going on in their week and what's up with this activity or this and this and this, the follow-up from maybe last week's conversations, but the engagement in that gather where people feel like, oh, it mattered that I showed up. Someone wants to talk with me. And I mean, I always say that there's always someone who's like, I'm an introvert. Please just just stand near me. Let's not chit chat. But like, how are we creating a space where kids and everyone feels like it matters that they're there, you know? Like I talked about those two parishes, like they were not going to give you an option to not be known, seen, and loved. And they were like ready to embrace you, however that looked. So I think also we could think creative on how we help someone feel like they're part of it. Some of my favorite ones that are very simple were, you know, they'd come in and we'd give them a sticker that was a certain type of sticker so that we could put them in a group for an activity, or we'd put a marker color on their hand, or we'd, you know, one year when we had money at the parish, we gave them each a bandana, you know, like we just wanted to help them have a sense of, I belong with someone in some way as soon as they walked through that door. And some of it, I've met parishes who they take old Polaroid pictures. I guess it's not old anymore because people like do that now. They like have the Polaroid cameras, which are super cool and trendy. And they like make sure that they take pictures if a kid is newer, like with other kids, but then they get to write their name on it and they hang it up in their youth space. Or if they don't have a youth space, they take it back down and put it back up the next week, you know, just like it works on all the adjustments we make when we're in parish life. But it's the idea around what are those small things that help someone feel like I walked through the door and I didn't just have to be a wallflower and stand there because I didn't know how to engage or what to do. And that's what the gather is. The gather also continues to be a part where we gather everyone literally, we sit down, we open in prayer, and then typically an option to have like a game or an activity where developmentally you can break down any sort of maybe wall or something that's going on in their day. We all need a good laugh every now and then. We need to play. We need to have fun. And I also think that if you do that in community, you start to feel like, oh, these are my people. And I feel like I belong here because I'm enjoying this time together. So strategically, when you do some sort of activity, well, yes, you can always do the ones where you have, you know, an upfront game where someone's up front, but maybe it's a way to find how can all of us do a game together? Like how can everyone be a participant? And I know there's always some kid who's like, I don't want to participate, but there's different tiers and levels. You know, you're in ministry, you could get creative in that. But the gather, I think, matters. And then I think it matters that we do a proclaim and they understand that. They understand that there's some sort of teaching for this session, that we're not just here to hang out while social time is important and community matters. We want to teach them the gospel. We care about them so much. We want to share the truth of the faith. And so to take that transition would be something to also continue to think through. How do we teach them that we transition from A to B, which is typically maybe a high, you know, maybe you have a really high energy game and they're like, okay, now we're going to talk about purgatory, you know, so like you want to make sure that you have something seamless, and that can typically be whether it's a small nudge about the topic of the night, you get to pray with them, maybe you can play a song and everyone can just kind of bring it down a minute. But having a transitional aspect can be very helpful. The proclaim teaching goes without saying. It's what all of our catechists are great at. We go up, we talk about the faith. Inside of that, though, I think what helps lead into the small group portion I'm going to talk about in a minute is the idea around having some layer of testimony inside of our teaching. And I'm not saying testimony like I stood up on top of some stage and I gave you this whole world of my life. I'm saying like just the reality to help teenagers feel like, while I am on the journey of faith, there's elements of things that have impacted me. We remember stories people tell us about their lives. And so when we can have those moments where they tell us a quick story about how God really showed them something they were praying fiercely for, or whatever that is, it can kind of help us bear that witness that we're hoping to inside of when we're teaching them about the truth of the gospel, the catechism references, et cetera. Usually it's encouraged that every youth group time that you have in youth ministry is a space where they get to break it open. They get to break open what was talked about. It's a chance for all of us to sit here and say, spill the tea. We got to talk about this. No, but like the idea around, as an external processor, I appreciate a time of processing, to be totally honest, but let's have them learn how to talk about it, and let's learn how they grow in community. And there's an intimacy in sharing and being vulnerable about how the faith matters to you, or how you're struggling to see how it matters to you. And that's where there's so much growth, I think, inside of our teenagers, is when they get to talk about it, where they get the floor in a way to talk and to share and to process and to wrestle. And I think I've shared this before, but so forgive me, but the Steve Jobs autobiography talks about how at the beginning, he talks about how when he was a kid and he was at church and he had questions for the priest, and the priest was like, I don't have time for that right now. And I laugh about that as someone in ministry, because I was like, he probably asked him as he was like getting ready to walk down the aisle. Like he probably didn't have a lot of minutes to answer his questions in that moment. However, the crust of the whole message was that Steve was like, I didn't go back to church. And I think what I take from that story, which is very little, but what I take from that story is teenagers have questions. And they have to wrestle with it, and they have to learn with it, and they have to walk with it. And we get an opportunity to do that inside of youth ministry. So I think that it's good to make sure that that space is carved out, and that can happen inside of those small group conversations. Plus, I always hope and pray that every teenager we had in every small group over the years, this was all part of the large group gathering. I always hope and pray that those conversations felt like a dialogue, so they were equipped to talk about their faith as they went forward into college and beyond. Because the world of talking about your faith in your little bubble at your parish is a totally different world than the one that maybe is when you fly across the country and go to a different university. And so having the space to create that where they feel like they can dialogue and they can process and they can receive mentorship could be so instrumental inside of that. The last part usually that we love to make sure, obviously, as youth leaders and evangelists, is we want to make sure we pray with them. And it's a great educational space too. So yes, we want to pray with them and for them, but are we teaching them the beautiful prayers that our church has, and making sure that it isn't just like, my grandpa's so funny. He used to always say stuff like no swatting flies before we prayed grace with the whole family. And he would always make sure, like, don't make it sound like a mundane drum. Like he was so good with all 23 grandkids. Like, I'm going to tell you, we're going to be on it this time. But it was like the reality of like, yeah, let's just not mumble jumble our way through an Our Father. Let's like mean it and say it and live it and breathe it. And so the prayer time inside of each large group gathering to have some great intentionality is just so good. And I think that the challenge when we go through typically like a youth ministry session, whether you do gather, proclaim, break, send, or whatever your setup is the temptation is sometimes we don't time it well, and then we lose the prayer time, which is really one of the best things we could ever do with these kids. And so just assuming that a large group doesn't mean relaxed, it doesn't mean unstructured. It actually means like, yes, we have to have times, we have to practice, we have to have a plan, we have to be incredibly prepared. Teenagers know when we're not prepared. I always love to tell the story about the time I I was printing small group questions off in my office and bolting it across the campus to make sure that we were getting ready to start on time. And just like the first time my small group leaders read the questions was as I handed them to them, which was completely unprofessional and not acceptable at all. But like I look back on that and I was like, that looked so unprepared. We did not seem like we were on the ball at all. And kids probably felt that lack of preparation too. But I think the structure is a necessity in ensuring that we are able to hit all of the aspects of it that we think best feed them, which I believe is developmentally appropriate stuff like a game and then a teaching, including a testimony, ideally, time to process and pray together and wrestle with some conversation, and then pray as we send forth and as we go back into the world with all that we have taken in that time. But the structure is really important. And I think what we sometimes miss the mark on is the transitions. I mentioned this briefly earlier, but we also don't want to transition to feel like super bumpy or like, wait, who's going next? Or what are we doing? Or are you supposed to come up? So one of the best things that I think we do well is if we are running a youth ministry session that we have very clearly designated the time allotted, who is overseeing what transition, and never to just assume we'll go from A to B to C to D, but there's clear communication on, okay, so when I finish speaking, what happens next, and just not to assume that I'm the transition person or someone else is coming up or who's going to make the break, because it's bumpy and we want it to feel like we care enough about them being there. And we're going to put in that time and that effort to prepare it. Plus, the more we practice the transitions, the more natural they are, especially to us as leaders and then to the teens as well. I think about, like I mentioned, the difference between small group and large group. And I really believe in my core that they complement each other. I think that there's a lot of opportunity where inside of a large group that you gather with every other week with all of the students, that you could even say, like, we're going to gather and we're going to start doing in the season of Lent or in the season of Advent, we're going to do small groups. Would anyone be interested in participating in these small groups, in addition to what we're already doing, but a time where we can journey together and maybe even having this like trial phase where we try out some small group time and we gather together and we meet off of the parish grounds, maybe, if it's all, cool and within safe environment regulations. But the idea around we're meeting and we're having this conversation, but maybe it's just giving us a chance to learn that skills. And again, like we want large group to be a cast wide and we want small groups to be a cast deep. And so we want to be able to go both and inside of every session that we do. I was listening to a bunch of the previous YouTube videos the other day when I was working through some, when you got to turn on a good podcast, you got to turn on some good music, when you're just kind of cranking through stuff. And I was listening to a bunch of the YouTube videos that Evangelize Boston has done this year. And I've been blessed to be in the one last month. And so I was like, what did everyone else talk about, And so I was going back and listening to everyone's. And one of the things that Everett said that I really liked is he talked about how the small groups really are about needs getting met, needs for critical thinking, needs to wrestle, needs for guidance. And I was like, yes. Enough that I stopped what I was doing and went over and like wrote all that down, what he was saying. But I think that can be a huge part of our large group gatherings as well. The idea around that we want to make sure that they feel like they have guidance, that the critical thinking can be happening, whether it's inside of the small group that's inside of the large group, or even inside of maybe a time of processing where we give them space to journal in front of the Blessed Sacrament. We want them to wrestle with it in the conversations. We want them to trust us as mentors and core members, that they could ask us questions and not have to feel like, oh, yep, I agree. That makes total sense. But if they're really not there yet. So just making it feel like those effective strategies can be totally played into our large group setup as well. And when I think about the effectiveness of those large group, I really believe that what matters is that the details around how we help it all come together, like I was saying, the structure and the preparation, and how to make sure that they feel like, yeah, this is something that feels put together and exciting, and I'm intrigued enough to come back again, which is a good thing. I think our invitation to them returning is also something not to get lost. That they know that when they were there, we were ready. When they were leaving, we were with them as they left. We weren't like wrapping everything up and cleaning, but we were ministry of presence at its finest. A couple of years ago, my second of my four and I host a Galentine's Day party for the girls in her class and the moms. And I'm a little bit crazy because it's a lot of people inside of my house, but what is noise? It's all good. So anyway, we were having a Galentine's Day party, and the party started at 9:30, and this sweet mom showed up at, I think it was like 9:05. And I think she had the time incorrect. However, I still had a towel on my wet head. I had no makeup on, and we were absolutely still like where you're wiping the bathrooms at the last minute to make sure it's absolutely the cleanest it could be. And poor Denise, she came in and she was like, "Oh no, I'm early." And I was like, "It's okay." And it really wasn't okay, but I didn't know what to do or say in that moment. So then she was like, "Well, what can I do?" And I'm like trying to be like, "Oh, here, you can put these donuts out or whatever. I got to go dry my hair, you know?" And like, it wasn't one of the people that we were like close with. Like, it wasn't one of my best friends. You could be like, "Oh yeah, hey, welcome. Glad you're here." I felt like I needed to be on. So ever since that was like 3 years ago, every Galentine's Day, I am ready clearly 30 minutes before moving forward. But the idea around when that teenager shows up, to make them not feel like, "Uh-oh, I'm the only one and I'm early," because someone's got to be first. Some kid has to be first. And what do we do to ensure that they feel like, "Hey, we're so glad you're here"? And then how do we make sure that we're all standing together so there's more than just a teen and an adult there? So the preparation, that we're all ready for them to walk through the door with an environment and an atmosphere that feels like, "Hey, we're so glad." And if they come in and they go, "Oh, I'm early," be like, "Yeah, how awesome is that? We're so ready for you." Like, that is what we're aiming for. And guys, that's a lot of work. Like, I'm sitting here and I'm like, this and this and this and this. And I know in my core, to be ready and to be prayed up and to be excited and on it with all the preparations is a lot of work for y'all and a lot of work for the team. And so I'm not naive to be like, "These are so great," without assuming that, yeah, there's a lot of planning and preparation that does need to go into it to be on and to be available. It is still, I think, the best practice is to have that readiness. I would make my core members show up 30 minutes early so we could pray together. That was the linchpin. You're there so we can pray. And then we will be ready for that early teen who gets dropped off a little bit too early, but we're going to be ready and excited for them. And there's always someone who's first and a little bit early. And as someone who is now a parent of four, I absolutely will sometimes be like, "You can be early," or, "Oh, I'll pick you up late." So I am absolutely on the other side of that. But the preparation piece of that takes a lot of time, really does matter. One more thing I want to talk about is auditing your sessions. And so whatever it looks like right now is great. It doesn't mean that it will be the best of the best or whatever. Like, where you're at today doesn't mean that everything has to flip tomorrow. However, it's really prudent to audit the sessions of what happens at youth ministry right now. And I love to ask the question, first and foremost, is, what are teenagers thinking and feeling and doing when they're at your youth ministry? And I love to ask that question when they're walking through the door. And I love to ask the question in terms of every component of every part of the structure that we have designated it. And I also like to ask the question about when they're ending. So like, we would go 7 to 9 on Thursday nights. So it'd be like, so what are they thinking, feeling, and doing at 9 o'clock? Have they already started to check out because they've got so much homework? Are they worried about having to go home to be at such stressful home environment right now? Have they really not been here with us naturally all night because they're thinking about a big test tomorrow? You know, whatever that is. But I think it's important to ask, what are they thinking and feeling and doing? I met with this parish. They're just outside of St. Louis, and it was so fun to drive down to Southern Missouri and meet with them. And they're all volunteers. And it's 3 parishes that have been merged together. And there's a DRE and a pastor, and I did 2 sessions with them, and they came for little parts of it. But the youth ministry itself is run completely by these volunteers. Different seasons, different stages. It was really cool, a good diverse group. And I was like, "Okay, so where do you stand?" If we're like, we weren't in their youth space or anything like that, but we were in like a church basement. I go, "Okay, so teens walk through the door. This is the youth space for the night. Where are you? Where are you standing?" And they all kind of looked at me like, "I don't know." Well, I mean, and I was like, "Well, first of all, none of you should be next to each other. We'll start with that one." You know, like, so it was fun to be able to literally say, we're going to walk through a session and we're going to pretend that this is what's happening right now. Where are you supposed to be? What is that supposed to look like? I had another parish where I didn't do this, but they had like, they didn't have teenagers come, but they were like, I don't know if they were like parents or other parishioners or whatever. And they just said, "Come and be teenagers for us." And they said, pretend you're a teenager walking through, and it tested out the core members to figure out how do we engage with people. And again, they're messing with them a little bit, like they're playing the character. But it was just a good idea to say, if all we do is just keep doing what we've done, we're never really looking at how to make it better. And I just think it's good for us to pause. And sometimes that pause happens in the dead of summer when things have kind of slowed for a minute. But hopefully we can audit what a teenager is experiencing, because it kind of goes back to, gosh, what is that book? I got to find it. A whole book I read on customer service once. And it talked a lot about airlines, which is one of my favorite things also to learn about, because I'm always so intrigued about it. I think if I was not in ministry, I would go be a flight attendant. But I feel like, and then I have so many stories. Invite me back then, Patrick. That would be so fun. But I think there's a lot about that idea, like we don't say this in church work, but like, what is the customer's experience with us? What is it? And what are they experiencing? And I know a teenager's world might be a little different, but at the end of the day, we want them to feel so much that they belong there, so that if it comes down to, am I going there or am I going to do something else, that they think, oh, youth ministry is really important to me. I want to be with that community and where that belongs to, where I belong. I would also say, like, how do we engage with students when they walk in? This is part of that audit, where are we standing, like I said, but like, what do our conversations look like? Are we needing to revisit a little bit about like, how do we talk to people? And I'm probably talking to the people who are like, I know how to talk to people, Katie, but I also know there's probably a catechist on your team, in your circle, who's maybe a little bit more trying to figure out how they interact with teenagers and what that looks like. And how we just build that relational ministry, which I know Annie had talked about. So like the hope is that we are figuring out how we're engaging with them. Are we making up little games while they're gathering so that we have something to hang out with? Like there's always a family in the parish looking to donate their old board games. So if you can find some old board games that people want to pawn off into the youth office, maybe you can have some teenagers gather in that way as they're hanging out before the whole event starts. But the hope is that people can swap stories and hang out and check in and feel seen, like it all matters that they showed up. And then really I would go into an audit that would get down to, how well are we doing with our time? Are we always feeling rushed? Are we getting to the end of a session and feeling like, oh man, we didn't do that part of it? Now, sometimes you got to just say, Holy Spirit said we weren't supposed to do it, and that's what it is. But most of the time, it's also on us to say, did we steward the time well that we had with these students tonight? And did we do it in a way that would help them feel like it all mattered that they were here? So checking in our time, what does that look like? And then evaluating even our proclaims. I wonder if there's someone in your parish who's a really rock star public speaker that could even just come and share like, hey, here's some great teaching points when it comes to how to talk with teens. What does that even look like? And being engaging with them is an important part of it. I always say there's parishes who are like, oh, well, we'll let the teens evaluate everything. And I was like, oh man, let me know how those questions go. Because they don't hold back, which can be good. Honesty can be really good. But just to know, we can tell when we're speaking if body language has people invested or not with us anyway. So I think it's good to evaluate our proclaims and what are our teaching and what does that look like. And then the other part would be to say, let's evaluate our small groups. Let's talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of these conversations. And not necessarily that we have to dive into every part of things that kids said, but what is working and what is challenging, and being able to assess those pieces of it. And then to go into the send part and say, like, should we be doing different ways of praying? Should we be inviting our priest here more? Should we, what does that look like to engage that? Should we be doing more with parents at this time? And it's a great opportunity to keep opening up that conversation. Sometimes in ministry, I think the temptation is to say, I think we're good. We're doing good. And we're just going to kind of hang into what we're working with. And the reality is you might be doing really great and it might be going well, but we get so static if we don't sit there and ask those questions. Everything doesn't have to be flipped in 1 year, but I do think that it's really good for us to continuously say, like, we should audit what this looks like. And if we do it in a creative way, it helps our team feel like they have a footing on what am I really supposed to be doing in this role, which is also a good way to do it with new volunteer leaders that are helping you annually every single fall. My last story for you, and then I'm here for some questions if you guys want, is I was listening to a parenting book the other day, as one does. I bounce between a spiritual book and a parenting book. And on occasion I get a good fiction one in there. But it was talking a lot about when your kids when other people's kids come to your house who might have kind of a rougher situation or something going on, do they feel this sense of peace? Like, does your family create a sense of loving and exciting and welcoming peace? And then hopefully, obviously, your kids also feel that, obviously, but just that the hope of that all people, when they walk through your home, that your parenting styles are reflective of something that helps people feel like you matter, like the Grays care about you, you know? So anyway, it was a whole big exercise and a whole lot of stories in there. Something that was much more traumatic than what I just shared. But it was the idea around like, yeah, like that's what I hope for our home. I mean, some days I act like I don't, and I shut down the garage and I say, I hope no one knows that I'm here. But I feel like most days I want people to know, yeah, like come on in, like all of it, everything of you, whatever. It's all good. We're happy to have you. All are welcome. It's in that gospel where it talks about, we may have entertained angels while welcoming strangers. And so just the idea around being present and helping people feel like, yeah, you belong here. And I hope our teens and their families get to feel the same experience when they walk into the doors of our youth ministries as well, that they feel like, man, I feel like at peace, I feel loved, I feel seen, I feel known, I feel like I belong. And that large group gathering really has that opportunity to spread wide and just help people feel like, come on in, the doors are open. So back to you, Patrick.
Thank you, Katie. For those, I know we've got a larger group with us now. For folks who came in late, I have been putting notes in the chat so you can follow along with some things that you missed. Also, hopefully a helpful summary of some of the key points that Katie has hit. I'm happy to ask Katie some questions, but it's more important to me that you all get a chance to ask Katie some questions. So feel free to unmute, raise your hand, put them in the Q&A, put them in the chat. We'll give you a minute, and if not, I'll probably ask Katie some questions, but I'll give you a moment first. Yeah, Sheila, go ahead.
Yeah. So hi, Katie. So we've been using Life Team for, I don't know, a few years. And like we started in the pandemic. Like I was hired like at the start of the pandemic. It's long on ramp. But and so like the whole gather break things, we do it every single time. Um and one of my questions, so I might have like as many as 80 kids in a room at a time. And so one of the things I struggle with is because, we do, and we break them into small groups, and I have, the core team, and we're sort of, been bringing the core team along and all of that. But one of the things I struggle with is like learning their names, to be honest, because there's so many of them. And, um, and even though like, I might finally go away on a retreat with them after some time or whatever. So my big question is where do you feel about, like, how do you feel about name tags?
Yeah. Oh, I love
feel
name
like
tags.
that's not like radically welcoming to be like every single, like 6 months in, I'm like, you need a name tag.
I mean, Sheila, you could do it in a creative way too that says like, write your name and then write what your superhero power name or something would be under it or something like that too. Like you could do it where it adds to it as well. I am a big fan of name tags. And even if you know them, I still feel like that's a great way. It helps me. I mean, we go to conferences and I'll sit up and I'll talk from a stage. And so people be like, hey, and you'll be like, how can I strategically look at your name tag that's hanging around your neck and make you feel like I'm so excited to see you? And most people I've learned over the years because of my role, but there's definitely some people you're like, oh my gosh, who is this? So I feel like at the end of the day, Sheila, I am here for name tags. I think you can make them creative. You could make it like if they're in core groups, they could be color coordinated. Like it could have like a layer to it that doesn't just feel like write your name on this name tag. And at the end of the day, 80 kids is a lot of kids. And it might be helpful for you to know like who, maybe you can print most of the people who usually come or something, and then it gives you a chance to see who didn't come. I don't know. Anyway, I just keep thinking I would not shy away from name tags. I mean, if you had like 5 kids, Sheila, I'd be like, yeah, that's kind of weird. But like 80 kids is a lot of kids.
Together.
And I think just from a name stance, first of all, that's a lot of people. So that ain't nothing to sneeze about. I think the other thing you could challenge your core team with is, so at our gym, they have to say so many names during the camp to the people on the floor. And so you could also even say to the core members, like, I need you to talk to X number of people, or I need you to say, like, you could give out challenges of
Mhm.
like, yeah, we're going to make sure we're really stretching our connection points so that everyone feels like they get a chance to be with us too. So I also, Sheila, not knowing your setup, I really will go back to my little Polaroid example because I feel like there
No,
could
I
be
totally wrote down Polaroid.
yes. And like hanging is great too, but also you could make a little album where you get to study it. Maybe you could go to Holy Hour and be like, Lord, I just want to pray for, and just literally read all the names off of the kids who came with their Polaroids.
At, with it at Apple, at St. Lee's next in 2 weeks.
Has your core, real quick, just another question, has your core kind of stayed consistent, or do you feel like you've had some turnover over the years?
So, I've been really lucky. I have three adults who are not parents, which,
Oh, yeah.
because like, the parents tend to follow the
Hmm.
teen, right? Which is how I ended up in this job. So, she keeps just showing up, just give her the job. Um, but so I have three or four who are not parents. So they've been really consistent, which is to me fantastic. And then
Yeah.
I have some parents who've also, like have been with me like 2 years or 3 years. And now, some of them get a little burnt out, but you can sort of see them coming with the younger grades. And I know that they'll still be core team, so in that sense. The other question I had was about because we've been very deliberate in creating a small group culture, right? So they come, there's like the big group, but they're with, we
Hmm.
break them out, they sort of sit at tables usually, and have like the small group discussion. And I do sometimes think, is I think for some kids and some groups, it works really well. And then sometimes I feel like some kids are like, okay, I really don't want to be sitting at this table with the same people anymore.
Mm.
And I kind of wonder like what's the balance there, like in terms of letting that group sort of really gel and become a group and really feel like, oh, this is a group, this is my group, these are my people, like like I trust them, I know them, the core team person like knows the kid, like knows each and every person at their table, who's
Right.
in their small group and has that relationship, which sort of why we do it, so that they have the relationship with the
Yeah.
adult. So like what's the balance between keeping them together or maybe not keeping them together? Like, I don't know. Like I feel like I've just started to run into this sort of question for myself. Like,
Sheila, are they sitting together as a group when they're listening to the teaching?
yeah.
So I wonder even if it's just a simple, like during the game and during the teaching, they get to sit wherever with whomever.
Mm,
And then, but on occasion, I wouldn't do that every time necessarily, but I think that you could probably flip it a little bit and give them some more like, because maybe they're like, I really want to sit with this buddy over there for a minute. And maybe you could have them together for the game or something like that too.
yeah. Yeah.
I it's a good problem to have, but you're totally spot on, Sheila. Like the idea around having the community and the connection, more togetherness, really good. If they're starting to feel a little bit or feeling like, oh, I want to sit with other people, I do think you could get creative in how you mix like a game team because you could say like, I'll
Mm,
take one of from each of you or something like that or something,
yeah.
So you could mix up for some of the stuff that's a little bit more, I'm going to say surfacey in that way, like
Yes.
the game.
Yep.
Some sort of food activity or anything like that too.
Yeah. And my last thing is just really a comment. And I found that I feel like COVID, because you were talking about teens and body language, and I think that COVID has really had an impact on reading teens and like
Mm,
reading like people's faces and their body language. And I think people are because like my daughter's a senior in college and my son is a sophomore in college.
mm,
And so she really missed the pandemic, right? So it happened at the end of her junior year. And then my son was a freshman in high school. And now, like these next kids, like, so I just sometimes like, I'm like, okay, and I've said this to my daughter. I'm like, nobody like smiles or like laughs at my jokes or like, I'm like, I
no.
know I'm funny. I know it's funny. Like, what's like, is this on? Like, what's happening? You know?
Yeah.
So I don't
Yeah.
know. I just want to see sometimes I feel like, and then like I get them to like write down a question It's like I can't get them to ask a question. So the other day I did this thing where I was like, everybody has to pass up a question on a please. It's about the Eucharist. I know you have questions.
Sheila, that's a creative way to definitely approach it. And also, like, I think, yes, I think the pandemic played into that. I also think sometimes different seasons of different kids, because I remember being like, this is 2014 or whatever. I remember kids being like, oh, I'm not laughing. I was like, what? I know I'm funny, like you said. But I think that it could be seasonal too. Like we could meet a bunch of kids at some point that are like, oh, super engaged. But yeah, I think there's a difference in that body language. And you're right to get creative in how to connect with them for sure.
Yeah, I just say that like at making the group like write down questions and pass them up. Really, like I was like, oh, should have done this sooner. Worked out really well.
Sheila, I did want to suggest one other fun thing that might be helpful is if there are 80 kids, maybe there's a way to do some sort of a get to know you fun night where they get to share and highlight something about them. I don't know what that is and whether that's, we did one of those kind of a talent show of sorts. So, like you got to do some sort of your talent or whatever, but maybe there's different ways where you can get them over the course of a couple of months where people get to say something. And it's kind of like star student, if you will, can go back to a
Yeah.
good old second grade thing. But the idea where people get to share and it by default helps you, but more importantly, it's helping them get to talk about exciting things about their life and share with their community. And then the community gets to celebrate them and stuff like that too. So
Thank you.
thanks, Sheila. Hey, Patsy. Oh, sorry, Patrick. Can I?
Oh, yeah, that's fine.
I was just going to chime in. We use name tags every week. And I tell the kids we have like 65 middle schoolers. And I'll tell them your small group leader knows your name. You're not doing this for their small group leader, but like the other small group leaders don't know your name. So, that's usually
Well,
my
and they don't know each other. That's my other thing. I do say that to them, like
yeah.
because they're from different schools and
Yeah.
different, they don't know each other necessarily. So
But I had a small group question. Most of my small groups are great. They're getting it. They've been gelling. Things are going well. Some of them are having a blast. Sometimes they're on topic. Sometimes they're not. It doesn't bother me. Like they're making relationships.
Yeah.
But I have one small group of boys, and I can't get them to talk. She can't get them to talk. They won't talk. They don't. I don't think they have any desire to know each other. They're there because their parents are making them come. It's confirmation, prep, whatever. Any advice?
Oh my gosh,
Do I
Patsy.
just break them up into like take one and put them in each other group? But then I'm afraid I'm going to destroy the other groups.
Do you have a male core member that you can switch up?
Yes and no. I do, but their small groups love them.
Sure.
So if I were to take them out of their small group, they would be like, no, we lost whomever.
Jared said it so well. It's always the group of boys. And the reality is I've met a lot of wonderful, committed, faithful Catholic men who were that boy in that group who wanted nothing to do with being there for confirmation. But we're so glad that they were there. I would consider a couple things. I mean, Patsy, it's end of February. So it's a matter of like, do you end in May typically?
Early May, yeah.
Okay. So start counting down the weeks. There's a part of that too. I think that if it's switching up a leader for a little bit, maybe that's it. You could do your April Fool's switch up where everyone is a different leader for each group one night or something like that. But I think there could be some flip in that, although it is just kind of toward the end of this. You could, to your point, you could pull them and go put them in other groups. Do you think that serves the boys well and the groups well? I can't speak to it perfectly because I'm not knowing your kiddos, but I do think that
it's a group of uncatechized boys who disappeared after First Communion. They're
Sure.
back because their parents are making them come back.
Sure.
They don't go to mass. They don't know much about the faith, and they don't seem very interested in learning about the faith either.
Is there a way, Patsy, to, like you said about that other group that's like, sometimes they don't talk on topic, but they're building relationships. Is there a way to cater the conversation inside of that from whatever the topic of the night was that's a little bit more conversational on something more relational or topical to what they might engage in?
Maybe.
I think ministry of presence is where that really will shine, though. Like, if you've got 8 weeks left of this, that's a big estimate. I just kind of threw that out there. But if you've got, maybe it's 15, no, but you got a couple months. And so I'm thinking about like how, when they walk through, can you be engaged with them as a core team? What gather activities can you do that could engage them? When the sun decides to come back out, is there a way that you can go do any relational ministry outside before the session? Like, physical movement for our dear friends that need it. Like, I'm just trying to think about, we had a group of that. Everyone has a group of that, but we had a fabulous group of that. And two big things that stand out is a solid male core member. His name was Braulio. He just rocked and rolled. He was just kind of like, let's go. Like, he came up, he always shook their hand. He always gave him a big side hug, like he was like super into like caring about them. And then the second one that I remember is the kid who wanted to be the funny guy, the cool guy, the important guy. And we utilize that energy with games and gather activities and upfront activities. And I got him kind of to be a little bit more like, hey, man, hey, Jack, I need you to be this. I need you to do this for me. Can we do that? And like, when I could prep him on that, and then we got to the next week and he was able to be on for like, hey, I need you to lead prayer. I need you to close prayer. I need you to care. I need you to bring your A game. Like, he was good about it. And it really actually helped turn the tide of that group of boys a little bit, because then he was invested. So maybe there's one inside that group too, Patsy, that you could be like, all right, who's my kid in this small group that would be the closest to not being crabby about being here? And let's use that kid to our advantage of like helping him get a little bit more engaged, a little more invested. Maybe he can bring some of his buddies along too.
Yeah, I think part of the problem with the group is I have 2 8th grade boys. Out of 65 kiddos, I have 2 8th grade boys. Mm-hmm. So they're mixed with 7th grade boys.
Yeah, that's hard.
And then they're like, where are the other? And if one of them is absent, so help me.
So with that question though, Patsy, and I don't know your cord member capacity, but like, could you split the 2 8th grade boys to have their own little small group in this final stretch? I say small group, that's the wrong terminology, but essentially like a 2-verse-1 conversation.
Maybe.
The other thought is the like, where they could maybe like, hey, because you're the 8th graders, like, hey, we're going to walk outside for our small group. We're going to have conversations because you guys are becoming these high school kids in a quick minute, and like kind of pouring into them a little bit different might be a way to do it. Again, I don't know your core member capacity, but maybe you could utilize the fact that this is the final stretch of their middle school time.
Well, they're going to be in there again next year because the preschool, I know 9th grade is going to be in Edge next year. So
right, but for the sake of them being the only 2 with this group, it's kind of something where you could sort of cater to them a specific like, hey, let's do our small group differently because you guys are the only 2 8th grade boys.
And then following up on that though, next year I'm going to have a lot of the same kids. We're keeping all the 8th graders. We're bringing up some 5th graders into 6th grade. A lot of the groups are gelling. A lot of the groups love their core leaders. They're engaged. They're working well together. What do I do with this one group? Like, do I try and stick them together for another year? Do I break them up? And I'm like, I'm afraid that they're going to unintentionally, it was like the not well-behaved boys that are together that aren't going to, they're not invested.
Yeah, and they feed off each other not being invested. Do you think that, is there a likelihood that you'd have different additional kids register between now and then?
Yes.
I'd probably try to set apart the 9th grader small group to feel a little bit different.
Okay.
A 9th grader and a 6th grader is like a marathon apart from each other. So just even considering like, how can we be creative in that? So for our parish, as you're saying this, this is what came to mind. Our parish, our faith formation, we confirm in 7th grade. And our faith formation goes till 8th grade, and then high school is like come and go. But the current setup now is they have the 8th graders get to have kind of their own special like small group time. Like they're a little bit together with all of the middle school kids for faith formation, but they do it a little bit separately when they get to that second semester of 8th grade, which would be like working with your 9th graders maybe a little bit more differently.
Okay.
Not like outside of Edge, but like, again, like, can you do the middle school or excuse me, the small group time a little bit different?
Yeah. I mean, we already split them mostly. we don't have a space where we can teach them all together. So I teach a group
Yeah.
upstairs and somebody teaches a group downstairs. Have them then seventh upstairs and seventh and eighth down, but that seventh grade is split again. So
I'd probably start a
might
novena
make them a
and I'd
co-ed
say
group
you
though.
registered, and then I'd get creative. Those would be the three things I'd do.
All right. Thanks, Katie.
Hello, I'm with my team members here. So we've been loving these ideas and we've kind of been chatting about some things that we can use in our parish. We're kind of on the opposite spectrum of Shayla and Patsy. So we're starting our youth group for the first time after many years of not doing it. And so we weren't expecting a big flood of people right away. And so it's kind of trickled.
Yeah.
Started with like 3, then a consistent 5. Now we've got 8. We're getting somewhere. I don't know if you have advice on advertising the group because we announce it at the end of Mass. It's in our bulletins. It goes on our social media. We created an Instagram page. We say like we're having ice cream, pizza. Like we'll advertise like that one night ice cream, one night pizza. We'll say snacks for the others. I don't, but we've gone to the CCD classes to like tell them a little bit about it. We've even dedicated one CCD class day of like merging all of those grades who are eligible for like who can come to that group and kind of introducing them to like what they might learn.
Doing all the right things. Always saying all the right things. First of all, I love it. And it all takes a minute. The first number of kids, we had 4 that came to my very first youth group. And I was like, oh my gosh. And then like a year and a half later, there were 75 kids. And I was like, someone take pictures. Like, this is a big deal. But I think, first of all, that's awesome, all those things that you're doing. A couple of things I might add are, can you actually have the teenagers in some way assist you with like how that social media, like promo stuff gets spread?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, Shelby, you and I could sit around and have the best ideas. And if a teen says it to another teen, they have way more clout. But I think that how do we utilize the teenagers? So then do your teens, like maybe these 8 teens who have shown up, are they at the same high school, Shelby, or are they in all different high schools?
Different. Well, we have a wide range. That's why we were kind of laughing at like 6th grade versus 8th grade, 9th grade and whatever, because we kind of had that. We have a few young ones and then the rest are high school.
I think that the high school ones specifically, you could almost like empower to go and ask other kids to come. It's like this big brother, big sister setup where kind of they get to represent and invite, and they see a kid. So let's say a teen comes one night and then they don't see him for 2 weeks or whatever, but one of your teens sees them at school and is like, hey man, you should come back. Like, we would love to have you there. Like, almost kind of how do we help create, it's pure leadership in the best of ways, but in a sense that has them out there doing the invitation and everything. Do you, is there allowance at your parish to speak from the pulpit during announcements?
Yes.
So I would say your teenagers should do that.
All right.
And again, like, I'm here for it. And I know we're looking at 2 audiences. We're looking at the people who are in the pews and we're looking at the people who are not yet in the pews. And so I understand that. And we're talking right now, some of the easy stuff, like talking all the masses, and we see all those people on the Sundays and stuff. But I think that would be a big part of it. Is a teenager inviting teenagers is just a little bit different than you or I, which is fine. I think we're dynamic people, Shelby, but I also feel like they would be really excited and intrigued at that. So it's almost like encouraging and empowering some of our teens to share their witness and what that looks like. I think you got to give it time too. I feel like every parish I've ever worked with takes a good 3 years to really get off and running. Some will get sooner, but just as a reminder, like, if you just kicked it off, you're an infant, and infants can't walk or run yet. So just, in the time it takes. But I think that's a big part of it. And then the last part I have, and I'm sure that Sheila and Patsy would have some too, but I would even recommend, like, what does the outreach to families look like in a very personalized way? The old concept of a phone chain, which I know doesn't exist everywhere because home phones aren't everywhere anymore, but like, there is something to be said about, like, I'm going to call this house and I'm going to say, hey, I'm the youth leader and we're so excited. We know that you have these 2 teenagers inside your house and we offer this. And like, it could be a lot of voicemail, Shelby. And I think the outreach of that would be something that takes people off guard in the best of ways. So like there's this priest that I know, and this neck of the woods is really small, but he literally, when he became pastor, not my neck of the woods, it's like a little more south, but he went door to door and met every parishioner. I mean, it took him about 8 months, but like at the end of the day, like he went and found the houses of the people who were registered in his parish and he knocked on their doors. And so I say all that, and in the world that we live in, I know people don't answer their doors, and I know that people don't answer their phones. Have you ever heard all the jokes about like, who do I put as my emergency contact? Because my husband's not going to answer his phone if you call them. So, but like the idea around, yeah, they might not, but it could be a super friendly voice from a parish, and it could be an invitation. And like, it's just very different than what they're maybe even used to in that way too. So, I was talking about like getting into those churches and people being like, they don't need anything from me. They're just glad I'm there. And so we also there's this culture around like, if someone calls me or they want something from me, and it's like, we're just here to let you know we love your family and we're praying for you. And we would love to see you here. And maybe there's a specific invite, like a specific event or a kickoff that you guys can kind of like feed to. But I think that would be fun. And then the last thing is, I do know that there are, and I know there's not like home phones and cell phones are weird in parish registry and records. So I also say that I know that sometimes that's kind of messy, but I was just trying to add something to my Apple Wallet the other day, and it was like, we've sent this text to this number, and it's my old home phone from like 9 years ago. And I was like, how do I undo this? What do I do? That we don't own anymore. But years ago, Shelby, we did put teenagers in cars with adults, and we drove to houses to invite outgoing 8th graders into 9th grade ministry. And like, at first it was like 6 adults, which was a little weird because we didn't have kids yet. But then teenagers were involved in the program. And so they came along for the ride. And so we usually went and delivered a small gift and invited them to be a part of it. And I just think something like that, which goes back to the whole ministry of presence world, is just a really important thing. So it's a little out of the box, Shelby, but it does take away the idea of like, we've put it all out there. We're so excited. And now it's like, no, we actually need to go to them. So
we love it over here. Don't worry about out of the box. It's great.
Shelby, we also, real quick, we sent letters to every parent of a graduating 8th grader who was in the parish at that time. And it was a very distinct, like, we want to partner with you. We value the relationship that we have with you. Your child means something to us. Like, your faith matters to us. And it was just a big invitation, but it was a very clear, like, poignant, this is our audience, which is parents, and recognizing that parents feel overwhelmed and they feel busy, and this is one more thing. So how are we meeting them with that need and helping them get some buy-in on this? And then we also sent something to every kid, which back in the day was magnets, which I am such a proponent of magnets, but back in the day we had to make them, and now you could just order them and they could be here in 3 hours. But I feel like the magnet goal, Shelby, was that everyone had the schedule for the semester on their calendar, because I always believed people didn't throw magnets away. And so, I mean, I occasionally throw magnets away, but like not as often. I mean, we still have definitely real estate agents with Cardinals schedules for baseball seasons that are long gone. So just like the idea around what's something that helps them be in the know, and then what helps them feel like there's an investment that you are here to offer them.
Thank you.
I wanted to throw in one outside the box interesting idea. So I used to be a coordinator of youth ministry in another diocese. And one of the big things that we would get together as coordinators of youth ministry from different parishes with the diocesan office and do was cookie ministry. We would all either bake cookies or get parishioners to bake cookies. And we would call the local Catholic high schools to be there like at lunch or during transition times, like whatever time. And we would set up a table in a place that a whole bunch of kids were going to walk through, and we would give them cookies that we baked. And that was like a way that we would get in front of kids that we wouldn't necessarily see.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe they still do that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I would have cookie.
Another idea, Shelby, that's worked well in the past is if you have your team members take a Sunday, pick a weekend, and go to every mass. Even if you're not talking at the mass, you look for every kid in your specified age group and try to learn their name, say hi, and say, hey, we had this cool thing. And what we did in the past was make like on Vistaprint, it was not very expensive to make little business cards. And it had like, this is where the event is, come and bring a friend. That was effective. And just to bounce off what Katie said, prior to me getting into ministry, I was in sales. And the most success I had in generating new business was phone calls. And you would think in today's day and age, I mean, social media is super important, email is super important, but because people aren't expecting that, and especially when you're calling them, giving something, as Katie said, that's free and good for their kids, they would take notice of that. It's super uncomfortable. Absolutely. Some people are going to hang up on you, but your win rate picking up the phone is going to be a lot higher. And I would also just say, everyone wants to be at 60, 80, 100 kids, but the fact that you've gone from 2 to 8 in 1 year, like give yourself some pat on the backs too. That's awesome.
Vistaprint. Jared, I haven't heard that name in quite some time.
I know. They're still around. I know.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Also, especially if they're like going out of mass and they're like, I don't want to talk to you, whatever, but you like, here, take my card.
I've got a question that came in a direct message to me in the chat. So say you are not in the position of having a Life Teen subscription and access to all of the awesome resources you would find there. Where would you go to get ideas for Gather games?
Honestly, I feel like I'd go do minute to win it games for sure. I think that Google is your best friend for games like that for sure. I've got a lot of ones I can also send you. So whoever asked that question, please email me. And also, I'm not in the position to get a subscription to ever be a hindrance for y'all. So if there's a way I can help make that happen, can have an Oprah moment. But I do have an old Gather game book. I think I have a PDF. It's a couple years old, but let me go see if I can find that too. So have whoever it is email me and I can shoot that out to them too. But I also do feel like minute to win it games can come in pretty clutch. And honestly, probably there's so many great Protestant websites that have their Gather games all over the place too. And like can do filters around. I probably use so many of them. Gosh, where you can even like filter like large group, small group, or if it's like upfront games or whole group games and stuff like that too. I'm like, I bet if you go like get like Google for Orange and oh my gosh, I bet Google would have so many youth specialties back in the
specialties, yes. Flipping through those books, yeah.
Yeah,
You'd
absolutely.
be surprised what you can get through Chat GPT. So my husband does a lot of AI work, and like,
yeah,
he sort of has challenged me. And I actually went to a meeting, youth ministry meeting, and it was like how to use AI in youth ministry. And I was like, all right, well, this will give me something to talk to my husband about. this breakout group. And every now and then, like I'll put something into, and I'll be like, can you give me a game that like involves the fruits of the Holy Spirit, and then like I needed to do this and that, and it's like,
oh, that's
and
awesome.
I have to tweak it, but it'll totally work. It totally
Yeah.
says like, and I need it to be for Catholic kids who are 16, and it's going to be outside, and it can't be a whatever, like it can't
I
be
love that.
like a scavenger hunt or something, like not a scavenger hunt.
Oh, that's such a fun idea.
But like, yeah, so like I don't know, put it in, whoever it was, but Chat GPT,
Also,
like
I
try.
mean, the longer we get in youth ministry too, you guys, my team did one of these battle show game rooms where you go and essentially there's an MC and you play all these games that you can't actually use the real terms of. Like they can't call it Family Feud, they call it Survey Time or something like that. Anyway, but then they play this other game, and we kept looking at each other like, this is a retreat game, this is a retreat game, this is a retreat game. Like when your mind just starts looking in that direction, you're like, oh yeah, how can I make this? I remember watching, and not that I would promote this now, but like Ellen DeGeneres show and being like, oh, we could play that game, we could play that game, we could play that game.
Another question from the chat. So say you've got young people engaged in your youth ministry who aren't making are not regulars at mass. Like, I don't know, their friends are bringing them there. They've gotten into showing up for your youth activities, but they're not going to mass. How do you have that conversation, encourage them in that direction? I don't know. What do you do about that?
Great question. I think a couple of ways would be, You could do, like I talked about that buddy system with high school, but like, is there a way where some other teen could invite them to go to mass? What does that look like? You could have teens who do go to mass, witness about what they experience, what they love, what they cherish about the Eucharist. You could do a teaching mass at one of your youth nights, which I know is always a little stretchy thing because of time and everything like that. But man, just a really big, great opportunity to help someone who doesn't even understand what's even happening. And I would probably do like a whole session on just the mass, the Eucharist, really kind of understanding, yeah, like what's happening. Because I think sometimes that's a big distance piece for a teenager is like, oh, I don't go. And maybe part of that could be family and everything like that. But I would also say, like, if we could help them see the conviction and what's going on, maybe they'd want to end up there too. But I do really think that, or latching on, like, we're going to do a retreat, we're going to do a session, and we're going to also have our priest here to answer questions about Bother the Father, or like, we're going to get to know more about it. And then the kind of a witness of how you could link on like any opportunity for the Eucharist to be celebrated to any of your youth ministry opportunities, I think is a big win too. And it's all witness. It's all witness. It's all excitement. It's all love for the Lord. You know, like there's lots of people I know who did not go to mass when they're teenagers and they went to college and now they are priests. You know, like there's just like in his time, but the invitation really matters. I love to tell people the story about a teenager that I had whose family never went to mass, and she walked herself there. And it was, she had such conviction. And I mean, it was close enough. It was probably like a 30-minute walk, but still, like, until she could drive, she walked herself there. When she'd drive, she'd go. So I think some of it just comes with invitation and witness and time. But I would probably get creative on how I would make a more intentional effort on teaching about the liturgy and helping people understand helping the teens understand what's going on.
I'm going to add, I wrote myself a whole list of questions, and I'm going to ask one sort of at random. Is there an ideal time frame? Like, what's the length of time you can expect to have a successful session? You know,
like a large group session, I would probably, Patrick, do no more than 2 hours.
yeah.
I think the best time frame is 75 minutes. And I think, you know, Life Teen writes content that's 75 minutes that can be drawn down to 60 or up to 90, depending on how you want to play with the timeframes. I think after 2 hours, you've kind of lost the attention and the spans and everything like that. But I also, especially depending on what time of a day you're putting it on, you know, by 9 p.m., kids, maybe they have their energy and I'm a pumpkin. But I think that the idea around in 75 minutes, you can still do a good amount of gathering time and connecting and relational ministry. And then it just gives you a chance to make sure that the meat of it is probably about a 60-minute time frame. So I've met parishes who try to do everything in like 45 or 60 minutes and talk about how rushed they feel. Yeah. Parishes who like try to meet with their youth in between their 2 masses on a Sunday morning, and they feel like their blood pressure is always high, which that would stress me out too, honestly. I feel like I needed to end. I knew when I have to end, but like if I have to end and we have to make sure everyone is prepared for mass, and like then you can't do snacks, it's a whole thing. So I feel like there's some stress in time of when you do it, but I think that 75 minutes is an ideal time frame to say this is when we're meeting. And some kids will hang out and some kids will come, or you know, all that. But
I'll ask one more. How do you engage young people in leadership? It's really popular here, at least, and maybe elsewhere, I don't know, to like, you know, oh, we've got the kids, like they're ministering to their peers or giving witness talks, or they're doing catechesis for the younger grades. And that's good, but like having somebody who's really well formed to do it, because too often I feel like a lot of places are putting kids in that position that are not really like committed yet, and maybe we don't know what's going on in their lives, and like outside of, you know, when we see them at youth ministry, there's other stuff going on. So how do you figure out when young people are ready to engage in leadership? How do you kind of equip them for that, and kind of discern who's ready for that?
I think when you've watched them, if so, there's been commitment in freshman and sophomore year, it lends itself to the conversation of how you can help form them inside of their junior year to maybe be that leader in the senior year. And I'm not trying to be that boxed into time frame, but really, if they've been super consistent and you see them at mass and you see them at youth ministry and they volunteer for the service, you can get a better pulse maybe on those 18 months to 2 years as they're growing into this world of being a teenager. What does this look like? And then I think I would probably try to have a dedicated time for my rising juniors throughout that year on what formation looked like. And like that could entail some layer of maybe there's exposure to doing some witnessing, or maybe a small group helping with something for maybe your middle schoolers. But I wouldn't give it's almost like your student teaching year, and then you get to be the teacher in the senior year. But I think it's like almost setting up expectations of what this looks like. And if you desire to be a part of our peer leadership program, there's a formation year where we are pouring into you with deeper teaching and apologetics and conversations than just only what you're experiencing maybe at our large group gathering. But you can't only go to that. You have to also continue to be a part of the large group gathering. You know, like we don't want to try to create this like separate group that does their own like little exclusive thing and then never engages with the other students, because when they're with the other students, we get a chance to see how well they are at leadership. And so like we want to see them put it into practice naturally and organically when they're not on as like, okay, you are officially a peer leader, go give this testimony or whatever it is. We want to see them in action. So I would probably spend a couple of months asking for their commitment and their parents' commitment and what that looked like. So maybe that's a once a month where we get together for an hour with these peer leaders who have desired, and we do a whole formation program on what that looks like to help them in their leadership. And then we give them more intentional roles their senior year before they graduate. And that maybe hopefully sets them up for a great success in jumping into a faithful way of leading when they get into college or beyond. So I think it's good to assess. I remember when I had one of my, he was great. His sister was super involved and he was great. I think he was a fresh sophomore, but his sister was a senior. And he was like, oh, like I can go with Allie and I can do everything with her. And I was like, it's not that you can't, but I wanted to give it time to breathe, where he really was being formed and not just like, I want this to look good. Because essentially at some point in the formation, it went from, I just need this on my resume, to I really have a passion for leading people to know who Jesus is because of who he is to me. And I wanted that transition to go from that point to where he was when he was finally senior. He now teaches theology at a Catholic boys high school in St. Louis. And I'm so proud every time I see him. But I always think back to him being like, because I remember saying the first time I was like, I need you to type out your first talk, and I would like you to present it to me. And he goes, oh, I don't need to write it. And I was like, LOL, absolutely, you will write that talk. What? He's like, well, Katie, I don't need references. I was like, first of all, as someone who does public speak, I'm going to tell you right now, you do, because you won't stay on track. I know that. So anyway, his name is Mike. He's awesome. He's a winner. And I think you got to give it time, Patrick. And I think that we have to allow them to be pruned in that, like we have to not just be like, yep, great, you look like a leader, because maybe they are, but you are making an excellent point. There's a life outside of youth group if we only get to see them for 1 or 2 hours a week that we don't know what that looks like. And we want them to be so in love with the Lord that it directs their steps in the way before we put them up front. So
I think I'll ask one more of mine, and then I'll see if there are any others, and then we can close. Do you always do break small groups like during, I get gather, proclaim, break, send? Did you ever like have the large group gathering and then the small groups meet at different times throughout the week? Is that like a terrible idea, or does that work some places?
We know lots of parishes who do both. And so they do also do the break inside of each large group gathering, but then they also have discipleship groups that they have formed over the years that do meet off campus or at different times throughout the week. And so that is a progressive thing as we have gone through the years. You're like, great, now we've grown into having these small group gatherings. The break itself can also be adapted. Like maybe you want to do Eucharistic adoration, or maybe you have the opportunity to do confession. But the good of having the break with the night is it gives them the chance to process it in real time. Like they just heard the teaching and now they can talk about it. And they could, if you have a discipleship group that meets outside of it, I think that's awesome. And then maybe you can elaborate on that conversation and grow from that, but it's not as fresh. And so it's sometimes nice, it's like right off the presses to be like, so Katie just said this in the proclaim. what do y'all think about it, or whatever it is. So, or what I used to always say is, what's a word or phrase that Katie said tonight that you find interesting? Like, that's always my favorite, like, lead off question. So, but I think it's good, Patrick, to have that. And I think we called them Christian life communities when I was at college. And I think like that idea and that concept of having a group of people that hold you accountable in your faith and help you feel loved, and like that commitment, I think is really, really helpful. And I think sometimes we grow into that. And I think there's going to always, and then there's kids like Patsy has, who are like a small group off campus, you crazy. So like, I think we just got to make sure we have the both and as we meet that space.
Just one more note from me. A couple things came up about like driving with young people and meeting with young people off campus, and like those things are possible. You do just need, 2 adults with young people in the car. There's a volunteer driver authorization or process in the Archdiocese of Boston. And if sometimes we're having these conversations and some people say, what? Meeting with kids in a coffee shop? I didn't know you could do that. Yes, you can meet with them off campus. Sometimes you need the permission slips, and sometimes, if you're taking them to the place, and if you're just showing up and saying, hey, we're all going to meet at Chipotle or Starbucks or whatever it is at this time, you can just meet them there and they're on their own for getting there and back. And that is possible. But I am putting a link into the chat to where we have our Trips with Minors document and other resources on policies and stuff like that. Just wanted to mention it since it came up.
Every time I ever drove them, they'd always be like, your car is so old. Like, they were so judgy. Like, forget you. You just meet me at this coffee house. I had cranked down windows. This was like a new car, y'all. What year was it? Like an 08 or an 09? It's like a new car, and it had cranked down windows. And the judgment that came from the students in my parish, like, okay, I know you all got a brand new Jeep Cherokee when you turned 16 because you're a little affluent group of people, but hey, this is what I could afford. I miss those days. Simple.
Well, Katie, thank you so much for spending this time with us last month and this month. If you came late and you've missed some of the previous sessions, we've had a whole bunch of people, and last month was actually Katie as well. Next month, March 19th, it's 1 month from tonight, the Solemnity of St. Joseph. We have Amelia Cowell from Ascension Sudbury talking about hot button issues, how to talk about difficult subjects with young people. We also actually have a retreat for faith formation leaders that day with Father Casey Beaumire from Boston College. So you could spend 12 hours with us that day if you wanted to. Entirely.
Great day, Joseph. Awesome.
And lots more information on evangelizeboston.com in the youth ministry section, and there's a confirmation section. All sorts of great stuff there, and of course, great resources at lifeteam.com and on the websites of some of the other groups that we're working with, like Y Disciple, Andrew Ministries, Young Life. Great stuff to check out. We're happy to talk more with you about that if you're wondering, hey, how can we at the Archdiocese help you figure out what youth ministry is supposed to look like in your parish more? We are here to do that. Katie's here to do that. So thank you for joining us, and thank you for watching, and have a good evening. Katie, could you close us in prayer?
Oh, I would be delighted. It's cool. You know what I'm going to do? This is the prayer that I pray every morning when I sit down at my desk. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Oh, Christ Jesus, when all is darkness and we feel our weaknesses and helplessness, give us the sense of your presence, your love, and your strength. Help us to have perfect trust in your protecting love and strengthening power, so that nothing may frighten or worry us. For living close to you, we shall see your hand, your purpose, your will through all things. We pray this in your name. Amen. Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. St. Ignatius of Loyola, not me.
Pray for us.
Thanks for having me, everyone. I'm praying for you.